Alright, what's going on, people? It's Boxing Genius here, and we are back to do a prediction on Spence versus Pacquiao. Now, this is not going to be for those highlight boys out there who only watches highlights and then they have fucking conclusions about everything. They have something to say about everything. Hey, Pacquiao has speed, that's why he's going to win. Hey, Spence has the reach, Spence has the height. I'll tell you why that's fucking full of shit, okay? Here's why. The reason why that's full of shit, and you should not trust those reasoning, is simply because boxing is a game of relativity, which means that whenever you look at a fight, you should look at it relative, or whenever you look at Pacquiao or you look at Spence, you should look at their strengths and weaknesses relative to their opponent that they're about to face. Relative to the opponent that they're about to face. So it's not only about Pacquiao has the speed or Spence has the reach and height, it's also about how will it play a role in their fight. And that's what I'm here for, okay? I'm not here to tell you cliche lines like, oh, Pacquiao has the speed, he's gonna win. Spence is flat-footed, that's why he's gonna win. I am here to tell you how exactly will that affect the fight and how it will be effective. You know, how will it work relative to the opponent that they're facing? How will Pacquiao's speed play a role, and how will Spence's reach play a role in this fight? You know, that's what I'm here for. So definitely click that subscribe button because you'll never get, or it's rare to get content like this, and this is going to be some top-notch breakdowns that we're about to do, okay? So, the first one that I want to talk about is the hybrid stance of Errol Spence, which I don't think anyone has really tackled, but it's a really good thing that we should look at because it's a foundation for his style and it's a foundation for how he sets up his offense and defense. So let me just show you what a hybrid stance is. So the hybrid stance is basically the idea or the stance where your feet is pointed straight to your opponent but your body is bladed. So as you can see here, the feet of Spence is pointed towards his opponent but his upper body is bladed. And what this enables him to do is this enables him to transition, as you can see here, from a bladed stance to a squared stance so with that he can set up his offense. So his feet is pointed straight to his opponent, but his upper body is bladed. And again, that enables him to transition from offense to defense real quick. Because whenever he defends himself, he's pretty much in a bladed stance. And whenever he sets up his offense, it's in a squared stance. So that makes it easier for him to transition in between those situation. So again, here you'll see how his body is bladed, okay, his body is pointed to one side and his feet is pointed straight to his opponent. And again, what that enables him to do is that enables him to transition in between the squared stance and the bladed stance from a defensive position to an offensive position. So over here from this position, you can see where his gloves are. The right glove is right there and then the left glove is also right there. The reason why he points his feet towards his opponent is because it gives more opportunities for him to throw at. So again, you'll see there, the body's bladed, upper body's bladed, and the feet is pointed straight to his opponent. And we're gonna see how that plays a role later on in the other things that I'm about to tackle, okay? So for this one again, the feet is pointed straight, the upper body is bladed. I'm sure you're getting it now, but I just want to show a couple of more examples so you'll understand, okay? Here, the body's bladed, upper body's bladed, and then the feet is pointed towards his opponent. Now, I don't want you to confuse his head positioning to his upper body positioning. Just because his head is pointed straight doesn't mean that his upper body's squared, okay? That's just an illusion that y'all might see. But the head is pointed straight, the body can still be bladed, the upper body can still be bladed. And again, we will dissect this slowly as we go on, okay? Now, the second thing that I want to speak on is the tendency of Spence to use his jab and then bait his opponent to throw a jab of their own, parry it with his left hand, alright, and then overstretching his parry. So there is an example of this in the Gotti versus Ward 1 where Ward was overstretching his arms and then he was getting caught with the left hook. So let's just look at this real quick, okay? Now, typically, when people talk about parrying, they talk about only parrying it to a point. You don't want to overstretch it. Why is that? Because when you overstretch a parry, like Errol Spence did here, boom, overstretch that parry, what's going to happen is your body is going to follow to that direction. So, a while ago, I was speaking on the bladed stance of Errol Spence in his upper body, but then, whenever he parries his opponent, and then he overstretches it, look at his body now. His body all of a sudden squares up, right? And the reason why that is because the natural mechanism, or the natural movement of his arms, the overstretching of his arms from parrying that jab of his opponent, results into him being more squared up. So over here, he's gonna parry this jab. Let me just time it real good. There it is. He parried that jab, he overstretched it, he lengthened his arms, and then he countered with a jab of his own. And that split second of squaring up can really open him up for a lot of stuff. Okay? I'll show you a couple more examples so you'll know that this is not only a one-time thing. Now they're in the pocket with his opponent. And then there's the jab again. He's gonna over parry, or he's gonna overstretch that parry. He's gonna check that jab right there, and then he overstretches it. Now what happens when you overstretch? When you overstretch the parry, what happens? What happens is, as you can see here, he starts off with a bladed stance. When he parries that jab, boom, now he's in a more squared stance, and he opens that right side of it, or that left side of his face a little bit more. Sorry, I'm confusing him for an orthodox right now. Same thing for an orthodox. When you parry, you open up the right side of your face. If you are a southpaw, you open up the left side of your face. So the same thing kind of applies, alright? Now here's another example of that. He starts off with a bladed stance, and then when he overstretches his left hand or his rear hand to parry that jab by his opponent, notice how he squares up, and his face becomes closer to his opponent. Okay, and now I know y'all are thinking some things already, but just chill, okay? We're gonna talk about some more stuff later on and how this will exactly play a role in the fight. So now there again, he blocks that hook, and then he overstretches with the left hand again. And this is a really dangerous move, man, I'm telling you. Errol gets away with it. Errol kind of adjusts really quickly, but against a fast opponent, I don't think this will work, okay? Now they're in the pocket again. And what's gonna happen here is he's gonna overstretch with the parry. Goddamn, I'm having difficulties with that word. I don't think this is it. Okay, so that's the last example right there. He overstretched with the parry on the rear hand, and that kind of put him in a more squared up position. So a while ago he was in a bladed position. By parrying that long and by overextending the parry to the jab of his opponent, he opens himself up for a lot of shots. So just look at this position right here. Boom. Okay? Open for the right hook, open for a lot of other stuff, open for a lot of great things, man. On this example, his right hand was up, but in a lot of other examples, his right hand isn't really that up. So here again, that parry gives that right hand up, pretty responsible, but we're gonna slowly dissect this, so just follow along with me, okay? Now the next thing, which Errol Spence has in his offense, a while ago we talked about his defense, now we'll talk about his offense, alright? What we're gonna talk about is the late entry. Late entry, what I mean by that is whenever he throws his lead punch, which is usually the right jab, okay? He's not gonna step in. He's gonna step in to load up on his power shot, which kind of telegraphs it in a way. So if you look at this, he throws the jab first, not stepping into it, and then when he's about to throw his power shot, he's gonna step in hard to it, and then he's gonna throw that left hook to the body. Some guys who have this kind of footwork are who has this kind of footwork? I'm trying to think of someone on top of my head. I can't think of anyone on top of my head right now, but yeah, the lead punch is kind of just a setup. They don't really put a lot of power into it. So the jab is separate from the left hook. That's what I'm trying to say here. You cannot call this a combination because it's a late entry and it's a delayed timing that's going on here. So he throws the jab and then he doesn't follow it up instantly with the right or with the left hand. Okay, so he kind of steps in here. He throws the jab first, waits up for 1 second, and then he steps in, loads up on that power shot, kind of telegraphs it in a way. So for this, you're gonna see that same thing happening. He's gonna throw a jab, and he's not gonna step into it. Jab is not gonna step into it. When will he step in? He's gonna step in the moment that he's about to load up for his power shot. So he's gonna lunge in here. He's gonna use a lot of momentum from this back leg, and then throw a left hook. Now let's look at another example. Here's gonna throw another jab, and instead of going 1-2 in a pretty quick rhythm, pop pop, instead of doing pop pop, he's gonna go pop pop. Instead of going bop bop, he's gonna go bop bop. So there's a slight pause in between. It's a delayed entry, it's a delayed timing, delayed combination. So he's gonna start with a jab over there. Jab. He's gonna load up here, use some weight on his back leg. So let me pause it right here. Use some weight on his back leg. Jab. Use some weight on the back leg, and then throw a left hook. Okay, so why will that not work against a guy like Pacquiao? Well, it's pretty dang simple. It's too telegraphed, and again, Pacquiao won't really get into a position where he'll allow his opponent to plant their feet. So if you look at his fight with Thurman, for example, when Thurman was planting his feet, Pacquiao was getting out of there, and Thurman never got to settle. Thurman never got to plant his feet to the point where he can throw fast combinations. He may sneak in 3 or 4 punches. He may trap Pacquiao in the corner for a while and be able to throw those power punches. But Pacquiao moves out of the way very quickly, and you won't really have that time to plant your feet enough and to plant your feet hard enough to where you can load up on those power shots. And Spence is really someone who operates by planting his feet hard on the ground. Now, if you face an opponent like Pacquiao who doesn't really allow you to get into that position too much, it's going to be really difficult. In addition to the fact that Spence has a delayed timing, which is kind of unorthodox. Some people will find it hard to deal with, but Pacquiao has seen it all, man. Pacquiao has seen people who have a delayed timing. Pacquiao has seen people who have sharp combinations like a De La Hoya or like Marquez, right? They have combinations who just go pop, 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 okay? Whereas he's also seen some delayed combination punchers like a Margarita where they go pop, 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 okay? So that's a delayed combination right there. It doesn't go in harmony with each other. There's a little bit of pauses in between. And some fighters find that hard to deal with. Pacquiao hasn't really found any trouble with that, okay? Brandon Rios, Antonio Margarito, he hasn't found any trouble with those guys at all, man. And they all have delayed timing, just like Errol Spence. So it's going to be really hard for Spence because, initially I thought he'll be able to trap Pacquiao and pressure him. But then after I looked at some of his fights, I realized that, he really took a lot of time. He's too slow. And he took a lot of time to be able to plant his feet and then throw his punches. He needed a lot of momentum from his back leg, man. He needs a lot of momentum from his back leg. So if you look at this again, just so that you won't think I'm bullshitting, I'll show you some example. When he threw that jab, he needed like a split second to load up on that back leg and then throw the left hook. And Pacquiao simply won't be there for that long, man. So on this second entry, again, he's going to throw a right jab. And then notice how he steps in, and it's too slow for my taste, man. He's going to use some load up on his back leg and then throw that left hook again here, a jab, and then he's going to dip down. He's going to telegraph that. I wouldn't say it's a telegraph punch. It's more so he tries too hard to plant his feet, and he tries too hard to get as much momentum as possible to the point where it starts to get predictable sometimes. And the reason why it worked on this particular opponent that he had is because this opponent is already hurt. Look at the round. It's already round 7 out of 10. So in the first couple of rounds, he already beat him up. Now, the question is, will he be able to do the same thing to Pacquiao? Okay, will he beat up Pacquiao to the point where they reach round 10, round 11, and then Pacquiao will simply be a standing target? I don't think this is going to happen. I've never really seen Pacquiao tired in a fight. I've never seen Pacquiao become flat-footed in a fight. His feet is always moving. So I don't think that it'll be much of a difference now that he's fighting Spence, okay? Now we'll talk about a mistake that I mentioned, or I tackled before. Again, man, I have a video for everything. So go ahead, check out my channel, keep watching him. Every video kind of carries over to the next. I don't know why, but for some reason, every video that I make, you know, 5 years or 5 months from now, 5 days from now, it's gonna be useful. It's gonna be used as a reference. So go ahead and look at that. I think it's called mistake people make when escaping the ropes. I think that's what it's called. So go ahead, check that out. And what I basically outlined there is that whenever fighters pivot out, this lead foot needs to get out far enough so that the left hand of your opponent won't be able to land, or if you're orthodox versus orthodox, the right hand won't be able to land. So as you see here, he's gonna pivot out, right? But his head stays over there. So even though he has already pivoted out of the ropes, his feet did not move to the right far enough. I'm gonna put an arrow in here just so that you can understand. His feet did not move far enough. So even though he already pivoted out and his body is already pointed that way, sideways, his head is still relatively there. So he still got caught with the right jab here, kaboom. And it's really important for Pacquiao because Pacquiao can take advantage of those pivots, and Pacquiao can kind of read Spence pivoting away and not moving his lead foot. Again, this is a mistake that I talked about in that, so if you're not getting what I mean here, go ahead and look at that video. Mistake people make when escaping the ropes. I think that's what it's called. Go ahead and look it up. As that will serve as a reference for this one. So again, I will just put this in the comment section so that you can understand it. So for this, it's going to pivot away again on this one. And then he got caught with the left hand. There, he pivoted out, okay? So technically, he's already facing sideways. He has already pivoted away. But what's the problem here? The problem here is he did not move his front leg far enough, right here, to where when he pivots out, he's far away from his opponent. So as you can see here, even though he has already rotated his body sidewards, his head is still on the same position where it's at a while ago. Boom. Okay, so even though he has already pivoted out, his head is not really that far away. And then he did that overstretched parry once again. Got caught with the left hand right down the pipe, or right down the side of his face. Alright, so the final thing that I want to speak on for this fight is going to be feint. Feint. And I'm not just going to talk of feints as a common cliche term that, you know, you can catch your opponent off guard or any of this shit. I'm going to speak on feints in the sense that it can be connected to the hybrid stance of Errol Spence, and I think that can be a more elaborate, or that can be a more comprehensive thing to explain it. So let me just show you here. Now, here is one of the pros and cons, or here's one of the disadvantage of the hybrid stance. The disadvantage of the hybrid stance is that you tend to put your weight on one leg over the other, and you don't find it as quick to transition in between your front foot and your back foot. So just look at this one. I'll make it really simple for you guys, okay? So for this one, you're gonna see Spence start off with his front foot, okay? So he's gonna plant his front foot here. Then he's gonna go back to his back foot, step with his back foot there, and then he's gonna lean forward once again. So this is a very subtle movement, okay? You may not see it the first time, but just go ahead and see it. Forward, backward, backward. And it's a very subtle movement, but it can make a lot of difference. And the reason why is because a subtle movement of the upper body corresponds directly to where you are putting your weight. So over here, you're gonna see him backward, forward, backward, forward. Okay, and then you're gonna see a slight lift of this left foot. Now what's the problem here? The problem here is that once your opponent establishes an attack, it's a lot harder to set your feet, and it's a lot harder to determine where you're gonna go. So just look at this right here. He's gonna go forward, backward, forward, and then his opponent is gonna throw a feint, and watch how he gets caught off guard and he doesn't know where to go. Is he gonna pull back? Is he gonna lean forward? He doesn't know. Why is that? Because he does not establish weight, the distribution of the weight, by using this hybrid stance too much. So forward, backward, boom. And then when his opponent threw a jab to the body, he doesn't know what to do, right? He gets caught in the front foot. So if you look at that, he gets caught right when he was on the front foot, when he was leaning forward, backward, forward, and then he gets caught right there. He gets caught off guard. And the reason why he wasn't able to move back is because exactly, he doesn't know where to set his feet, right? He's always all over the place. When you have this kind of hybrid stance and you are flat-footed, it's one of the worst things ever. And unfortunately for Errol Spence, is a little more flat-footed than most fighters. And by using the hybrid stance while being flat-footed at the same time, it's a lot harder to distribute your weight proportionally to where you can be able to defend yourself. So let's just watch this one last time. Forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, boom. He gets caught with a jab to the body, and watch how he reacts. He reacts very awkwardly. He drops his glove, okay? He leans forward while still being on the front foot. Or he leans forward while being caught off guard right there. Forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, backward, forward. And then here his rear foot is lifted up. Okay, so the moment his opponent threw a jab, he's not able to move back simply because he's too much on his front foot, right? And his rear foot hasn't been planted yet to where he can be able to move backward. Now, why is this important against a guy like Pacquiao? This is important against a guy like Pacquiao because Pacquiao is someone who's really good at feinting and someone who's really good at taking advantage of your reaction. So if you react like this against a guy like Pacquiao, he's gonna change levels, he's gonna throw a lot of punches from different angles, and if you just stay here, and if you don't distribute your weight properly to where you can move back, you can move laterally, you're just right on this position where you are standing and you're not able to defend yourself. If you are dropping your hand like Spence did here, right, he tried to block the jab to the body, and then he was looking up as well. His chin was up. And the reason why his chin was up is because if you look at this, forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, backward, forward. Now, when your weight is on the front foot, you tend to look up a little bit more. Why is that? Because you're a little bit closer to your opponent, and the natural mechanism of your neck is to move forward like this. So he is looking up at his opponent, and then when his opponent threw a jab, right, he put his gloves down, and then his chin is still up in the air. He did not cover his head together with his body. And this can really be a vulnerable situation for him because Pacquiao is someone who's good at throwing a jab to the body, left to the head, right hook to the body, or as you saw with Thurman, you know, for example, he threw a jab to the head, a left hand to the body, and then a right hook, while Thurman was moving back. Now let's take a look at another example. So here he's moving, circling to the right, forward. Again, look at his, the direction in which his upper body is going to is usually proportional to where he puts his weight. So it's either on the back foot or on the front foot. So so here he's gonna sway back and forth, forward, backward, and then there he got timed once again. And let's see where he stopped. Forward, backward, and then he stopped right at the back foot. He stopped right at the back foot. And what is the disadvantage of leaning on the back foot? Well, it's pretty simple. If you look at this right here, it is much harder to drop your weight and then block that jab to the body. So look at this, forward, backward. He's leaning back too much, right? His opponent throws a jab to the body, and then actually he stops right at the front foot. Okay. Again, I'm watching this a little bit later than when I studied it, so I kind of forgot a lot of things. Forward, backward. He stops forward again. When his opponent threw a punch, he was on the front foot. And the problem there is that usually when you're on the front foot, it's much harder to move back. So if his opponent tries to throw a jab to the body, all he can do is block it. But what's the problem here? Being on your front foot provides less coverage for you to cover. So if you're on your front foot, you have to choose what you're gonna block. You have to choose whether you're gonna block the head or the body. If you are on your front foot, it's much harder to cover the head and the body at the same time. You have to lean on your back foot and then shorten your upper body, curve it. Again, I'll have a reference video of this. Go ahead and look at it. High guard, or keys to the high guard defense. I think that's what it's called. Again, I'm going to link it down below. Every video that I make has a reference point that you can look back to. Okay, so it's, if I upload a video from months ago and then I have a video today, you can refer to that. So when you are on your front foot, it's much harder to cover the head and the body because your body is neutral. Your body is neutral and it serves, or it appears to be longer. And so look at that video. Right here, he got caught forward, backward, and then he goes forward again. At this point, this could have been good, right? But he decided to lean forward again, and then when his opponent threw a jab, he was only able to cover the body, and then look at this, his head is wide open. Why is that? Because when your body is leaning forward, your chin tends to look up as well. Your chin tends to be up. So his chin right here is super open, right? And then the only time he tucked it back in is when his opponent already got done with the attack. So right here, his face is still up, his chin is still up there, right? And then after his opponent attacked, he kind of remembered it and he was like, oh shit, I have to put it back. I have to tuck it down again. So he tucks it in right here. The hybrid stance is very susceptible to feint simply because the weight distribution tends to be all over the place, right? And the nature of the stance is basically to be more on your back foot, but to appear like you are on your front foot. That's the nature of the stance, which means that your upper body is going to be a little more forward, but your rear foot is going to be backward to where you're going to be forced to lean back a little bit more, okay? I know it's tough to understand, but this is basically the hybrid stance. The hybrid stance is your upper body is bladed, but your lead foot is pointed towards your opponent straight. And so that's what the hybrid stance is. Again, the problem there is, if you have the hybrid stance and you are flat-footed like Errol Spence, you won't be able to distribute your weight and your footwork tends to be all over the place. You'll find it hard to defend yourself. You'll be vulnerable to feints. And so let's just do a quick summary of this fight with all that I've said. Let's start with the overstretch parry. Now, here's the thing. The hybrid stance, the nature of the hybrid stance, again, like I said, it's a balance of the bladed and the squared stance. Now, if Errol establishes his offense, is going to be more on the squared up stance. If he tries to defend himself, it's going to be more on the bladed stance. Here's the problem there. The moment he tries to use the overstretch parry, right, what tends to happen is he tends to be more on the front foot. He tends to lean forward a little bit more. He tends to square up a little bit more. And his power hand is essentially being used as a defensive tool. Now here's the problem here. Pacquiao can sneak in a right hook over the top of that left parry, or Pacquiao can sneak in a right uppercut, or Pacquiao can use that overstretch parry to feint another shot, or to enter inside of that left hand parry. Okay, now let's just talk of two scenarios right here. Now I'm gonna talk. There's no examples anymore. I'm just gonna talk. Y'all try to understand it to the best of your abilities, but let's just do it. Let's talk of two scenarios real quick. Number one, if Errol Spence decides to pressure Manny Pacquiao, here's what's going to happen. Like I said a while ago, if you have the hybrid stance and you are flat-footed, your weight distribution tends to be all over the place. Now, ideally, you want to be on your front foot if you are trying to load up on your power shots. Okay, so if you look at Spence, he throws his body shots, he's always loading up on his front leg, his right leg. If he is on the defensive, he's more on the back foot. He's leaning back a little bit more. Now here's the problem there. If you are trying to be a pressure fighter against a guy like Pacquiao, like I said, when you are on your front foot or when you are on your front leg and you are pressuring forward and then Pacquiao decides to feint you, what's going to happen is your footwork will tend to go all over the place. If you try to establish your feet or if you try to plant your feet while pressuring Pacquiao, he's going to feint his way out of there and he's going to feint his way out of your power shots. So for a guy like Errol Spence, it's going to be really difficult to plant his feet unless Pacquiao gets tired and he won't be able to move as fluidly anymore, okay? Which I don't think is going to happen. Unless Pacquiao gets tired and becomes flat-footed like Errol Spence, I don't think Errol Spence will be able to plant his feet hard and then throw those body shots that he normally throws at Danny Garcia or at Mikey Garcia. He won't be able to do that. Now, let's talk of the second scenario. The second scenario, I'm just looking at the duration, just so I can make sure that it's not too long. Now, the second scenario of this is if Pacquiao or if Spence decides to move to the right, circle to the right, and then move with Pacquiao circling to the right side. And if you want to look at a fight where he did this against Mikey Garcia. Okay, he was circling to the right, he was jabbing, all of this. Again, what's the problem here? The problem is if you don't plant your feet, okay, if you don't plant your feet, it's even worse because the nature of the hybrid stance is you're going to be on your front foot and on your back foot alternately. So your timing is going to be way off, and your opponent can time you based on where you are leaning at the moment. So if you're leaning on your front foot, your opponent can time you because it's hard for you to move back. It's hard for you to move back. If you're on your back foot, however, Pacquiao can time Spence, because again, if you look at Spence, he only uses the bladed stance to be on the defensive. He doesn't use the bladed stance to establish his offense. So if Pacquiao can force Spence to be on the bladed stance, okay, and be on the back leg, lean back a little bit more, yes, it's going to be safe, but will he be able to counter off of that? Unfortunately, he can't. He doesn't really know how to counter off of that. Now, does Spence have the Philly shell? Yes, but he doesn't really counter much off of that. And again, if you look at the mistake that I pointed out a while ago where he was pivoting out without moving his lead foot, again, if he tries to circle to the right and then pivot, at one point he's going to get caught. Why is that? Because he doesn't know how to move that right foot and then pivot away far enough to where his head is not going to be on the line. His head is not going to be on the center, on the line of fire. So again, I have a reference video of this that I'm going to put down below. So here's how I see the fight going down. I see the fight at the center of the ring, to be honest with y'all. Okay, I see the fight at the center of the ring. Are there moments where Spence will be able to pressure Pacquiao to the ropes? Yes, I do think that. I think Spence will be able to pressure him. However, I don't think that Spence will be able to plant his feet long enough to where he can establish his offense. So if you look at Thurman versus Pacquiao, the same thing happened, right? You saw Pacquiao getting hit, but he didn't stay in the ropes long enough to where Thurman can gain momentum and he can really load up on those shots. You never really saw that happening there. You never really saw Thurman being able to plant his feet and using momentum from his legs, using power from his legs to be able to throw those body shots. And unfortunately, the power of Spence really comes from his legs. And if your power comes from your legs, you need to plant your feet. Now, why doesn't Pacquiao need to plant his feet? Well, it's pretty simple. His philosophy is volume. His philosophy is punches and bunches. His philosophy is 100 punches over your one power punch. Right? So he doesn't really need to plant his feet all that much. There are two different breeds. And if you compare them, honestly, if you compare their styles, I really don't think that Errol Spence will be able to figure out Pacquiao in 12 rounds. I think he'll need 3 extra rounds to be able to really figure Pacquiao out and eventually pressure him, eventually use his reach and all that shit. But for all the things that I talked about here, okay, the defensive flaws of the hybrid stance, the disproportionate distribution of weight on the front foot and the back foot from Spence, his inability to parry without overextending that left hand, his inability to counter from the bladed stance, and most of all, his inability to plant his feet against a guy like Pacquiao, which I think is going to happen. I don't think he's going to be able to plant his feet long enough to where he can really load up on those power shots. Can he land a power shot on Pacquiao? Yes. He can land like a left hook to the body, and then a right hook to the body, and then a left uppercut maybe. But before he even kills Pacquiao, or before he even knocks Pacquiao down, Pacquiao's already out of there. That's just my opinion. Okay, I didn't see any signs of getting tired from Pacquiao in his last fight, so I don't think legs is going to be a factor. People say he's going to run out of gas and his leg is not going to be able to move as quickly. I don't think that's going to happen again. I think Pacquiao is going to be slick. My initial prediction was Spence. To be honest with y'all, my initial prediction was on Spence, but by looking at the different scenarios that can play out in this particular fight, by looking at the flaws of Spence, by looking at the flaws of Pacquiao, and by looking at their strengths and weaknesses match up against each other. Again, boxing is a relative game. It's a game of relativity. You need to look at every fighter in relation to their opponent. So just because Marquez did bad against Mayweather doesn't mean he's going to do bad against Pacquiao. Just because Mayweather knocked out Pacquiao doesn't mean just because Marquez knocked out Pacquiao doesn't mean Marquez can knock out everyone that Pacquiao has defeated. It's a game of relativity. You need to look at every fighter in relation to their opponent, relative to their opponent. So before making a prediction, take this away from my video, man. look at the fighter relative to his opponent. That's why when people talk about, left hook of Donaire, if it lands, it's gonna land on Ubali again. Yes, Donaire has a very powerful left hook, but you need to look at it in relation to his opponent right now. I don't think Ubali will get caught with that left hook simply because he has all the tools and he has all the defensive mechanisms required to avoid that left hook. So please, before making all kinds of those statements, study the game. Don't just watch a 5-minute highlight of this shit. It's not gonna benefit you in any way. You're just gonna speak out of ignorance, and you're gonna lose some money, man, if you're betting on this shit. So subscribe to the channel if you're new. Sa mga Pilipino kong viewers, pasensya na hindi ako maaaring magtagalog ngayon kasi alam ko maraming hindi Filipino na manonood dito. But anyway, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys soon. I got Pacquiao by decision on this one, and yeah, if you want to bet your money based on this prediction, go ahead. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.